The past 3 years will go down in history as some of the hardest years that the world has gone through this century. However, as painful as it has been to live through, it's important to record the stories, the memories, the experiences of this time so future generations can look back and learn from it. The Light at the End of the Tunnel is a book that does just that. It's a compilation of over 50 stories from Sydney-siders from throughout the pandemic that provides a snapshot in time of just how much the world changed in 2020. I've got the author of the book, Emmy Roy, on the line with me right now. Emmy, firstly, how did the idea for Light at the End of the Tunnel come about?
Hey, Georgia. Thanks for having me on your show. So the idea of Light at the End of the Tunnel came about from the different stories that I've heard during these pandemic times. I don't think at any point of my life I've keenly listened to so many stories from so many people. And, there are each of us have been impacted. Each of us has been touched by this pandemic. And I knew that I won't be able to tell all the stories from across the world. But then I thought I'll do what I can do. Maybe compile 50 stories, which could be of relevance, as you mentioned, to the future generations. And that's how the project kicked off.
Fantastic. I want to ask you about the name. How did you come up with the idea for the actual name, Light at the End of the Tunnel?
I'm so glad you're asking me this question, Georgia, because there is a story behind this actual name. So in the initial stages of the pandemic, so in 2020, I used to regularly listen to the press conferences done by the then Premier of New South Wales, Gladys Berejiklian, as most of us would have. And then it was interesting that she always used to use this phrase, there is light at the end of this tunnel. It's not all bad that is coming. So that really impacted me, and I decided to train myself to think of things that way. So fast forward to 2021. When I was actually discussing with the library in relation to a name for this project, that's the first thing that came to my mind. And then they agreed straight away.
What kind of stories are within these pages? You've got 50 stories. I imagine there's, a diversity of stories. Can you maybe give us a sneak peek of one of your favourites?
Yeah, there are actually a lot of different stories which portray a lot of different emotions, like stories of kindness, stories of hope, but then on the other hand, there are stories of fear, anxiety. But one common theme that is in this book is that all of these stories signify hope, and all the people that have actually written these stories are survivors. They've survived a lot of different things, different emotions to actually tell these stories. So they are heroes and heroines, if you ask me. And to talk about one favorite story of mine, so it's actually about a doctor having a conversation with his patient, and, the patient is about to be put into ventilator. There is this, this grave moment when the doctor is trying to lighten the burden on the patient by saying that you're going to be given a break. We're going to, give you a restful break. We're going to put you on a ventilator, etc., etc. But then the patient doesn't really respond to that. He blankly stares at the wall and, talks about putting some wallpapers there to make his whole setting interesting, which the doctor agrees to. It's very moving, if you ask me, because, that kind of conversations, we know that in real life, many of those kind of conversations would have happened. And then the story actually touches upon the doctor's perspective as well as the patient's perspective of things, which is not really what we see in a lot of cases. We always hear about the patient's perspective, but the doctor would have felt so bad communicating that to the patient as well. So it's basically touching on several different levels of a human being having to say that to another fellow human being.
Emmy, what is the value, do you think, of a book like this?
It signifies hope. It signifies hope. This might give an indication. This might actually tell people in the future generations about how we coped and survived the pandemic times, how we adapted to the life during these times. Because, I see that this book might be read. This is my hope and wish, that this book might be read by people 100 years down the stream, 150 years down the stream, and then they can see what we did, what we've been through, and how we coped and how we survived.
Yeah, absolutely. Emmy, you have done such important work. Congratulations on this fantastic book and for sharing the heart behind it on Hope Drive today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me.
And you can borrow The Light at the End of the Tunnel in all public libraries in New South Wales right now, and it's also going to be housed in the archives of the state and federal libraries.